Have you ever been overlooked by your own family? Been compared, belittled, and made to believe that you would never be good enough? What happens when the one being looked down upon is the one holding the cards that can bring down the entire family? I've lived in my brother's shadow for 32 years, and I'm sick of pretending it doesn't hurt. My name is Lena Harper, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like the spoiled brat, the invisible one, the one who never amounted to anything. My mother, Susan, is 60 now, and she's spent every day of my life making sure I know I'll never measure up to Jake. I can still hear her voice from when I was 16, sharp and loud in front of a room full of relatives. Lena, you're a disgrace. Why can't you be like Jake and study law? What kind of financial advice is this nonsense? I stood there, my face burning, as everyone applauded Jake's straight-A law school transcript. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my eyes were swollen. No one noticed. Jake got a cake. I kept quiet. My mom was always like that, rigid, obsessed with appearances, and completely blind to anything that didn't fit her perfect story. She would sell her soul to brag about Jake, her golden son. 3 months ago, she texted me out of the blue, Lena. Jake has a great job. You should think about settling down too. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, my stomach churning. Stable? Me? The woman who'd built a silent empire while the rest of them looked the other way? Later, I found out Jake had planted that seed in her head, telling her I was out of my mind after I refused to bail him out financially last year. The message wasn't about her worrying about me. It was her repeating his lies. Every word she said to me stung like a knife, but I learned to swallow the pain, to keep quiet, to let it fester. It was safer that way. Jake was 35, a lawyer married to Claire, a gorgeous blonde who looked like she had stepped out of a magazine, and they had 2 perfect children. He was the pride and joy of the family, the one Mom couldn't stop talking about. I remember last Christmas, she stood in the middle of the living room, brandishing her phone like a trophy, showing off photos of Jake's new BMW. "Look, my son is great," she said, her voice full of pride while I sat on the couch sipping a warm beer. She didn't even glance at me. Another time, at a cousin's wedding, Jake made a joke of telling everyone that I'd lost my wallet when I was 12, as if that were hilarious proof that I was a mess, while my mom beamed and bragged about his latest court victory. Claire just sat there, smiling as if she were part of his royal court. They were always a unified whole, the 3 of them, Mom, Jake, and Claire, so radiant that I could barely see myself. Here's what they didn't know. I owned 3 rental properties in Austin. One was a $1,800,000 mansion, and I paid for it in cash. Every penny I earned from my meaningless job as a financial advisor. I'm not bragging when I say that. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was humble, but because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Hell, they'd probably laugh. The day I signed the papers for that mansion, I stood in front of it, keys in hand, staring at the glossy white walls and the vast lawn. I told myself, this place has proven to me that I'm not a failure. I don't need to show it off for now. I drove an old Toyota, wore basic. They thought I was struggling, renting a crappy apartment. And I let them think that. The tension had been building for months, maybe years, but it reached a breaking point with a phone call from my mother a few weeks ago. I was in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner, when her name flashed up on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I should have trusted my instincts, but I did. "Lena," she began, her voice dripping with the fake anxiety she'd perfected. "You're still renting, right? If you have ever been overlooked in your own family, always having to give in to keep things peaceful, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you speak up to regain your self-worth? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Why can't you be more like Jake? He just bought a beautiful house in Houston. You need to learn from him." I gripped the knife so hard my knuckles turned white. Renting? Learning from Jake? I wanted to scream that I had more money in my bank account than he would see in a decade, that I didn't need to learn anything from anyone. But I didn't. I just smiled, a short, bitter sound, and said, "Okay, Mom, I'll think about it." Then I hung up and threw the onion in the trash. I finished my dinner that night, but what drove me crazy was something I overheard a few days later. I stopped by my mom's house to deliver some mail she'd asked me to pick up, and I caught Jake talking to her through the half-open window. I wasn't even trying to listen, but his voice came through. "Lena's never going to make it, Mom. She's a hopeless case. Don't expect anything from her." I froze, my hand on the doorknob, my heart pounding in my ears. A hopeless case. That's what he thought of me. That's what he made Mom think of me. I didn't go in. I left the mail on the porch and drove home, my mind racing. I had planned to keep my head down forever, leaving them to live in their bubble of delusion. But that moment changed everything. Thanksgiving was coming, and I decided right then and there I was no longer their punching bag. This year, I wasn't just going to show up to eat turkey and put up with their bullshit. I was going to tear their perfect little world apart. Come Thanksgiving, I knew I'd have to listen to Mom fawn over Jake again while I played the part of the family's disappointment. But this time, I wasn't going in empty-handed. A few days earlier, I was browsing through the county mortgage records during my break, one of my routines at work, and something strange happened. My mother's name was listed on a property she had never mentioned. That's when I started digging. That night, I dug into the public finance app I used for work, and there it was, a second loan. My mother's name scrawled in a shaky, fake signature that didn't match her usual neat handwriting. I printed it all out, the loan documents, the proof of signature, and stuffed it into my bag. This was my ammunition, and I was saving it for the perfect photo. I'd purposely arrived late at my mother's house in Houston. I was wearing an old gray sweater and old boots, the kind of outfit that said, "Lena's still messy." My old Toyota pulled into the driveway, and I could already hear voices inside, cousins, aunts, Jake's booming laughter. I held my bag, the weight of those papers on my hips, and took a deep breath. The front door opened before I could knock, and my mother in her apron was beaming like she'd just won the lottery. "Oh, Lena, you did it," she said, her voice flat, as if checking off my list. I nodded, tried to smile, and stepped into the chaos. The dining room was packed, the long wooden table was piled high with turkey, stuffing, gravy, everything. The air smelled of sage and cranberries, but all I felt was a knot tightening in my chest. Everyone was seated when I slid into a chair at the end, next to some uncle who barely said hello. Jake was holding his place at the head of the table, Claire to his left, the kids giggling over their mashed potatoes. Mom stood, clinking her wineglass with her spoon, and I knew what was coming. "I just wanted to say," she began, her voice loud enough to be heard over the noise, "Jake did it again. He and Claire just closed on a 5-bedroom house in Houston. Can you believe it? 5 bedrooms, a huge backyard, the whole dream." She almost glowed, her eyes locked on him like he'd invented sliced bread. The room erupted in oohs and ahs, forks stopping mid-air as people nodded in agreement. Then she turned to me, her smile fading enough to sting. "Lena, you should see this sometime. Maybe it'll inspire you to take your life more seriously. Jake's setting a good example." I felt my throat tighten, the familiar burning sensation of humiliation spreading. My fingers dug into the napkin under the table, twisting it until it nearly tore. I could let it go, like I always did. Nod, smile, take the hit. But not tonight. Before I could stop myself, Jake spoke, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin I'd hated since we were kids. "Yeah, Lena, you should try working hard for once," he said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "Not everyone is as lucky as me, you know. It takes a lot of guts to do this," Claire interjected, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his arm. "Jake always said you needed to settle down a little, Lena. He's just watching out for you." Settled. Watching me? I caught the triumphant glint in her eyes, and I realized they'd been talking shit about me behind closed doors, probably laughing over drinks while I was building something real. The room fell silent for a moment, all those eyes on us. I could feel the weight of their expectations, the same old script of me shrinking and Jake shining. But I was done playing. I set my glass down, harder than I intended, the clink echoing, and looked straight at Mom. "Actually," I said, my voice calm, though my heart was pounding, I finally decided to let them know that I owned 3 properties, one of which was even larger than Jake's dream home. The words hung there, heavy, as if I dropped a brick on the table. Mom let out a nervous little laugh, the kind she used when she thought I was joking to embarrass her. "Oh, Lena, don't be silly," she said. Jake's eyebrows rose, but he didn't say anything, just stared. Waiting for me to back away, I leaned forward. "No, Mom, I'm serious. Paid off, no mortgage. And it's bigger than Jake's." The silence that followed was deafening. Let the moment linger, savoring the tension. They didn't believe me, I could see it in their eyes, but that was okay. I wasn't here to convince them yet. I was here to plant the seeds, to see them wiggle before I hammered down. Under the table, my hand slid across the edge of the bag, those papers nearly burning a hole in the leather. I thought about that forged signature, the $200,000 loan Jake thought he'd buried, the way he'd lied to his mother while she praised him. I touched him across the table, his jaw clenched, his fingers drumming on the armrest. He didn't know what was coming. Neither did my mother. It was about the reckoning I'd dreamed of for years, and it was only just beginning. The silence after I mentioned my third home felt like the room was holding its breath. Mom's face was still frozen in a sheepish half-smile, as if she were waiting for me to say, "Just kidding," and let her go. Jake's eyes were narrowed, his fork hovering over his plate as if he'd forgotten how to eat. Claire was fiddling with her napkin, her lips pursed. I could have stopped there, let them wallow in their suspicions and called it a night. But I'd gone too far, and I had too much ground to throw away. The papers in my pocket were pulsing, begging to be released. I'd spent years piecing together Jake's lies, and now I had the evidence to bury him. Thanksgiving was about to turn into his own personal hell, and I was the one who started it. I'd been collecting Jake's bullshit for a while. A few months ago, I found an old email he'd accidentally sent me, intending to send it to Mom. It was all flowery nonsense. "Mom, I have this great investment, great return, just needs some cash to secure the family's future." I rolled my eyes as I read it, knowing full well he wasn't buying the stock for the family. I'd bet my left kidney that it went straight to some shady crypto wallet. Sure enough, he'd been borrowing money from her ever since. $10,000 here, $5,000 there, always with some excuse about home improvements or dinner with clients. I'd warned her, calmly, over coffee, that he might be taking advantage of her. She'd retorted, "Jake knows what he's doing, Lena. Stop being paranoid." So I shut up and started digging. And that's when I found the mortgage too. $500,000 tied to Mom's name. No way she'd ever signed it on purpose. I pulled out an old birthday card she'd sent me years ago, her signature repeated and precise, and compared it to the scribbles on the loan papers. I printed everything out, even took a picture of the signatures side by side on my phone to compare. My hands shook as I stuffed it all into an envelope, not from fear, but from the thrill of knowing I was about to kill him. Jake thought he was invulnerable. Back at the table, I took a slow breath and reached into my pocket. The commotion started again, cousins whispering about football and aunt asking for more gravy, but it all died down as I slid the first stack of papers across the table toward Mom. "Here's something you might want to see," I said, my voice low but firm. Mom blinked at me, confused, then picked up the top sheet. It was the mortgage, $500,000 in bold letters, Mom's name plastered all over it. "Jake put your name on this," I said, watching her eyes widen. $500,000. If he defaults, and believe me, he almost does, you're the one who's on the hook. Mom's breathing quickened, loud enough to make Uncle Dan turn his head next to me. Mom gripped the paper so tightly her knuckles turned white, and I saw the first crack in her perfect little world. Jake shot up from his chair so fast it scraped against the floor, his face red. "What the hell, Lena? You're making this up to ruin me," he shouted, his voice hoarse as if he couldn't decide whether he was angry or scared. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the next piece of paper, the $200,000 loan, and set it down with a deliberate slap. "And this one," I said, tapping the fake signature with my finger. "Look closely, Mom. This is supposed to be your handwriting." She snatched it away, her hand shaking now, and held it close to her face. The room fell silent again, all eyes on her. She stared at the sloppy scrawl for what felt like an eternity, then made a sound I'll never forget, a sharp, hoarse scream. "This isn't mine! This isn't my signature!" She turned her head toward Jake. The table was in chaos. Linda gasped, "Oh my God!" Cousin Mike leaned over, squinting at the paper as if he could handle it. Claire stammered, "Jake, tell them she's lying," but her voice was thin and desperate. Jake staggered, his hands flapping as if he could break the truth. "Mom, look, I didn't mean it, okay? It's not what it looks like," he staggered, but he couldn't meet her eyes. His eyes kept glancing at me, then away like a trapped animal. I just sat there, arms crossed, letting him dig his own grave. "You used me. You forged my name. What else did you lie about?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just a pathetic wheeze. I could have left it like that, let her tear him apart and call it a victory, but I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the recording from last year, and pressed play. Jake's voice came through the speaker. "Yeah, Mom always said Lena had problems, mental problems, you know. You couldn't trust her with anything." The table froze. Mom whipped her head toward me, her eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place. Shock, maybe, or guilt? I leaned forward, my voice almost a whisper. "You believe everything he says about me, Mom. But he's the one who's been using you all this time." Inside, I was in turmoil. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my stomach was twisting as if I was going to throw up on the tablecloth. I hadn't meant to go this far, not really. I figured I'd drop the mortgage bomb and walk away, let them deal with the rest. But watching Jake squirm, hearing him lie through his teeth like I was the crazy one, ignited a fire inside me that I couldn't extinguish. He'd spent years putting me down, spreading rumors at family picnics that I was unstable, whispering to Mom that I'd never made it on my own, even smirking at me from across the room when he thought I wasn't looking. Now he was backed into a corner, and I wasn't going to let him get away. I locked eyes with him, jaw clenched, and thought, "You're done, asshole. I have more to come from this place." Everyone around the table was frozen, eyes darting back and forth between me, Mom, and Jake. The kids had stopped giggling, their little faces scrunched up in confusion. I'd just played the clip, his smug, mocking voice calling me a lunatic, and it felt like I'd turned the whole damn world upside down. Mom's hands were still clutching the crumpled papers, her breathing ragged, and Jake looked like he'd been punched unconscious, his mouth hanging open, unable to make a sound. I could have dropped the mic and walked away right then, but I had another card up my sleeve, and I wasn't leaving until he was a pile of ash on the floor. I shoved my phone into my pocket and pulled out another bullet, a screenshot of a text message I'd saved months ago. After that call, he begged me for money and got mad when I said no, sending a text the next day, probably thinking I was too much of a coward to keep it. "Sorry about last night, Lena," the text read. Didn't mean to be angry, just stressed, you know? I stared at the text, half-heartedly wanting to reply, but instead I took a screenshot and left it in my camera roll, a small promise to myself that I would use it someday. Now was that day. I held up the phone, the screen lighting up, and turned to my mother. "This is him apologizing for losing his phone, after I didn't save him," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "He's been struggling for money for months, crying to me, to you, to anyone who would listen. And when I said no, he made sure you thought I was the problem." Mom's eyes were locked on the screen, her face contorted as if she were seeing a ghost. At first, she didn't say anything, just stared, her lips trembling. Then she turned to Jake, and it was like a dam breaking. "You begged her for money?" she screamed, her voice so hoarse it made my skin crawl. "You dragged her name through the mud and you begged her? You forged my name, you lied to my face, and you—" "Fuck, Jake, I raised a monster." She grabbed the cup of water and threw it at him. It missed his head by an inch, hitting the wall behind him, splashing water onto his shirt and the floor. The room exploded. Gasps, screams, someone yelling, "Susan, calm down!" But she didn't hear. She was standing now, pointing at him as if she could burn him alive with her glare. Jake staggered back, holding up his arms as if to shield himself from her wrath. "Mom, I'll fix it, I swear," he choked, his voice high and frantic. "It's not my fault the investments went bust. I just needed time." But she didn't believe him. She lunged forward, snatched a loaf of bread from the table, and threw it at him. It hit him square in the chest, crumbs flying everywhere. "Fix? You ruined me," she roared. "You used me as a pawn, and you humiliated your own sister to cover your tracks." Her voice broke on the last word, and I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. Angry, ugly tears. The kind you see when you realize you've been a fool for too long. Claire was so embarrassed now, she was sobbing into her hands, mascara streaking her face. "Jake, you said it was safe," she whined, hugging their eldest, who was starting to cry too. "I told you we were safe." She pulled the kids up from their chairs, dragging them toward the living room, her heels clicking hard on the hardwood floor. "I can't do this, I can't." The relatives were buzzing like a kicked beehive. Uncle Dan muttered, "Knew that kid was trouble." Aunt Linda whispered, "Poor Susan," loud enough for everyone to hear. Jake tried to grab Claire's arm as she passed, but she shook him off, growling, "Don't touch me." He stood there, soaked and crumb-covered, looking like a drowned rat with nowhere to run. Mother turned to him again, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss. Get out of my house, you lying bastard. You're done for here." Jake froze, eyes wild, and then lunged for the door, almost tripping over a chair. The front door slammed behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The room was silent again, save for Claire's choked sobs down the hall and the children's wails. Mom sank into her chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. The relatives began to murmur, some of them moving toward her as if to help, but I stood still. I wasn't there to comfort her. Not yet, probably never. I stood up, smoothed my sweater, and walked over to where she was sitting. I leaned in, close enough that only she could hear, and said, "You always believed his lies about me. Told everyone I was a mess, someone who couldn't handle life. Turns out I was here to live that life, to actually live that life," she replied softly, walking away. I wasn't ready for that, not after all the times she'd brushed me off, like when I'd invited her to my first open house and she'd said, "That sounds like a waste of a trip, Lena." The memory still stung, even now. I straightened up, my chest tightening with a mixture of relief and heaviness. Grief, maybe, for the family I never really had. I didn't feel good about this, not in the way you'd think. Watching Jake fall apart wasn't a great victory. It just makes me sad, deeply sad, that Mom chose him over me for so long. I think of Dad for a moment. He's been dead for 5 years now, suddenly of a heart attack. He used to sit me down when I was little, show me how to balance the checkbook, tell me, "You have a smart head, Lena. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He saw right through Jake in a flash. I wish he were here to witness this, to see me stand firm while the golden boy crumbled and burned. The table was a disaster. Spilled water, scattered rolls of paper, the damn papers still crumpled in Mom's lap. I stood still, watching the mess I'd made. Not proud, not gloating, just finally free. This wasn't how I pictured Thanksgiving, not even in my wildest revenge fantasies, but it was real and it was mine. Jake was gone, his perfect mask shattered, and I did it. I destroyed it all with the truth, and I wasn't done. Until they all understood what I'd kept hidden for years. The story quieted down after Thanksgiving, but the wreckage remained. After the bank sent a notice of debt, I knew Mom wouldn't survive this mess on her own. A week later, I called to tell her she could stay at my villa in Austin if she needed a way out of the financial storm Jake had dragged her into. She showed up the next day, her suitcase rattling behind her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Hey. I didn't say much, just opened the door and led her inside. The place was beautiful, high ceilings, a wall of windows flooding the living room with light, and a deck overlooking a lake that sparkled at night. I caught her staring at a framed photo above the fireplace, me shaking hands with my very first tenant, both of us grinning like fools. "You did all this?" she asked, her voice soft like she was seeing me for the first time. I shrugged. "Yeah, no help, no handouts, just me." She nodded, slow and quiet, and I left her to unpack. I wasn't in the mood for a heart-to-heart. Not after everything. Before I'd left her house that night, I'd slipped a letter under a magnet on her fridge. I'd written it in the car after Jake stormed out, the ink still wet when I dropped it off. "Mom," it said, "you picked him over me for decades, believed every lie he spun about me being a wreck. Now he's the one sinking. Let him carry the weight you ignored." I didn't sign it with love or any of that mushy crap, just my name sharp and final. I'd driven off feeling lighter, like I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. She never mentioned the letter when she arrived, and I didn't ask. Some things don't need a reply. Word trickled in about Jake over the next few days, mostly through cousin Mike, who couldn't resist spilling the tea. The bank had come knocking, repossessed his fancy BMW, froze his accounts, the works. Claire had packed up the kids and moved in with her sister, filing for separation faster than you can say prenup. Mike said Jake was crashing on a buddy's couch, unshaven and ranting about how it was all bad luck. Then, 2 nights ago, my phone pinged with a text from him. "Lena, I'm in deep shit. One last favor, please." I read it under the glow of my kitchen light, laughed out loud, and deleted it without a second thought. He'd made his bed, let him rot in it. Mom tried to patch things up in her own clumsy way. She started calling me every couple days, her voice thin and wobbly. "Lena, I messed up," she said once, choking on the words. "I didn't see what he was. I'm so sorry." I let her talk, but I kept my end short. "Yeah, I know. Take care of yourself, Mom." Yesterday, she left a voicemail, 5 minutes of her rambling about how she'd misjudged me, how she wished she'd listened. I didn't call back. I sat on my couch, listening to it on speaker, the lake breeze drifting through the open window. Her apologies felt like rain on glass, too late to soak in, just sliding off. She'd had her chance to see me, and she'd blown it. Last night, I stepped out onto the villa's deck, a glass of Pinot in hand. The city lights winked across the water, a jagged line of gold against the dark. I leaned on the railing, the wood cool under my palms, and let the quiet settle over me. My laptop was still open inside, glowing with an email from my property manager. Another lease signed, rent checks rolling in. I took a sip, the wine sharp on my tongue, and felt something click into place. I didn't need Mom's pride, Jake's envy, or anyone's damn approval. I'd built this life brick by brick. My rules, my wins, my peace. They could scramble in the mess they'd made. I was done carrying their baggage. I turned back inside, locked the door, and left the past where it belonged, out there in the dark. If you have made it to the end, I want to say to you, not as a narrator, but as a fellow traveler in this life, if you have been a silent sacrificer and one day realize that you are worthy of respect, you are stronger than a winner. Share your feelings, your thoughts, or simply a line, I have been there. Sometimes your presence is what others need most to get through.